Imagine this. You're in the middle of a heated negotiation, and suddenly, your neighbor cuts off the power, literally. That's exactly what's happening between Canada and the US right now. Canada is threatening to halt electricity exports to the US in response to Trump's tariffs.
We've done big things together on the world stage, as Canada and the US have done together for decades, for generations. And now, we should be working together to ensure even greater prosperity for North Americans in a very uncertain and challenging world. Now, it's not in my habit to agree with the Wall Street Journal, but Donald, they point out that even though you're a very smart guy, this is a very dumb thing.
But here's the million-dollar question. Is Canada bluffing, or is Trump calling their bluff? Let's dive into this high-stakes game of geopolitical poker and find out who's holding the winning hand. If Canada were to cut off electricity and oil supplies to the US, it could trigger rising energy prices, widespread blackouts, and a major economic shock. This situation stems from a new US government decision to impose a 25% tariff on Canadian imports, including energy, sparking strong opposition from Canada. Since the US is Canada's largest export market, these tariffs could severely impact its economy, particularly in automobile manufacturing, steel production, and energy sectors. In response, Ontario, one of Canada's largest industrial hubs, is considering cutting electricity supply to US states heavily reliant on Canadian energy, such as New York, Michigan, and Minnesota. The US imports nearly 40 terawatt-hours of electricity from Canada annually, and reducing this supply could lead to power shortages, higher prices, and industrial disruptions, especially during peak demand seasons. Additionally, the US imports 4 million barrels of oil per day from Canada, making up 67% of its total oil imports, so further restrictions could create significant challenges for the US energy market. Beyond electricity, Canada is also exploring the possibility of limiting oil, natural gas, and rare earth mineral exports, all of which are crucial to the US economy. However, Canada has been working on reducing its dependence on the US by expanding its energy exports to Asia, particularly China and Japan, with the Trans Mountain Expansion, the TMX pipeline, set for completion in 2024, providing new market opportunities. Canada's ability to export oil in larger quantities to non-US markets could have serious consequences if trade tensions escalate, as it might redirect energy exports and leave the US scrambling for alternatives. While the US has significant domestic energy reserves, its refineries are largely designed to process Canada's heavier crude oil, making an immediate switch to suppliers like Venezuela or the Middle East difficult. Increasing domestic oil production would also require time, infrastructure, and investment. Meanwhile, Canada remains a key natural gas supplier for heating and industrial use, especially in the Midwest and Northeast, and its electricity exports are deeply integrated into the US power grid, meaning that losing this supply could create regional instability. Although the US could theoretically replace Canadian energy with domestic or imported alternatives, the transition would be costly, leading to higher prices for businesses, industries, and households. This raises a crucial question. Can the US afford to risk an energy dispute, or will both sides be forced back to the negotiating table before the damage becomes irreversible? This situation echoes Canada's past responses to US trade policies, particularly during Donald Trump's administration, when the US imposed heavy tariffs on Canadian imports. Instead of backing down, Canada retaliated with its own tariffs, sought new trade partnerships, and expanded economic ties with the European Union. With US-Canada trade valued at over $800 billion annually, any disruption could send shockwaves through both economies. The question now is whether the US can quickly adapt to a potential energy supply shift, or if this will become a long-term economic challenge. The goal of imposing tariffs was to protect American industries, but instead, it triggered a strong backlash from some of the US's closest economic allies. Experts warned that these policies could disrupt vital supply chains, drive up fuel and consumer prices, and hurt not just Canada, but also American businesses and consumers. Many are already feeling the impact: higher fuel prices, increased production costs, and a growing risk of job losses. Even more concerning is the possibility of an escalating cycle of economic retaliation between major economies. But why did the Trump administration take this gamble, and did they underestimate Canada's response? Canada wasted no time in hitting back, with Prime Minister Justin Trudeau calling the US tariffs completely unjustified and warning of economic harm to both nations. Canada responded with retaliatory tariffs on US goods of equal value, targeting steel, aluminum, and key agricultural products like beef, dairy, and fresh produce. But that was just the start. Canada aggressively moved to diversify its trade partnerships, signing new agreements with Europe and Asian nations like Indonesia and Ecuador to reduce its reliance on the US market. This strategy not only strengthens Canada's economy, but also puts the US in a difficult position, losing a key trade partner right at its doorstep. Canada didn't stop there. It had another major move in store: a long-term strategy to challenge American dominance in critical industries. Partnering with the European Union, Canada has formed a strategic minerals alliance to secure the supply chain for essential materials, like lithium, cobalt, and nickel, which are vital for electric vehicle batteries, renewable energy, and high-tech industries. Currently, China dominates this market, controlling over 90% of the global supply, but Canada and the EU are working to create an independent supply chain, reducing reliance on Beijing. This move not only strengthens economic security, but also sends a clear warning to the US. Without a smart trade strategy, Washington could be left behind in the race for the energy industry of the future. Beyond trade, European leaders are growing increasingly concerned about Trump's unpredictable foreign policies, especially after the US held secret negotiations with Russia over Ukraine without involving its European allies. This has pushed the EU to reduce its reliance on NATO, which is led by the US, and strengthen its independent defense strategy. France has already held high-level meetings to expand military cooperation, bolster defense supply chains, and increase defense spending. As Europe and Canada reshape their strategic landscape, a significant shift is occurring, one that moves away from dependence on Washington. In a surprising blow to the US economy, the EU has even chosen to rely more on Canadian energy instead of US gas, signaling a major realignment in global trade and geopolitical power. Europe is making a decision that could reshape the global energy market by turning away from the US, its biggest natural gas supplier, and looking to Canada instead. This shift raises critical questions. Why is one of the world's leading energy exporters losing such an important customer, and is Europe truly making a better choice? Or is this part of a broader geopolitical strategy? The turning point began with the war between Russia and Ukraine, which led to severe gas shortages in Europe after the EU imposed sanctions on Russia. Initially, the US stepped in as a key supplier, providing liquefied natural gas, LNG, to help Europe survive an energy crisis. But issues soon arose. US gas prices were significantly higher than global market rates, making American LNG an expensive option for European governments and businesses. Additionally, Washington's tough trade policies and shifting energy strategies with each administration made the US an unreliable, long-term partner. As a result, Europe started searching for a more stable, cost-effective supplier, leading it to Canada. Canada quickly became the EU's preferred choice due to its vast natural resources, long-standing stable trade relations with Europe, and strong focus on clean energy. Unlike the US, where energy policies frequently change, Canada has maintained steady cooperation with the EU, giving European leaders more confidence in long-term energy security. Additionally, Canada's commitment to renewable energy, including wind, solar, and hydroelectric power, aligns with Europe's green energy goals, while its abundant reserves of lithium, cobalt, and nickel make it a crucial supplier for electric vehicle (EV) battery production. Meanwhile, the US remains heavily dependent on fossil fuels and faces regulatory challenges in expanding domestic mineral mining, putting it at a disadvantage in securing future energy deals. The economic consequences of Europe's shift away from the US could be significant, with American energy companies potentially losing billions in annual revenue, while the US auto industry also risks falling behind as the EU strengthens its supply chain with Canada for critical EV battery materials. Beyond economics, the decline of US energy exports could weaken Washington's geopolitical influence, as energy has long been used as a strategic tool to maintain leverage over allies. If Europe finds a reliable alternative in Canada, the US may struggle to maintain its dominance in global negotiations. The key question now is whether the US will take action to reclaim its market share or allow Canada to solidify its role as Europe's new primary energy partner, marking a major geopolitical shift in global trade and energy dynamics. The US is now facing growing trade tensions with Canada and Mexico, which could severely impact its automotive industry and energy markets. With the Trump administration threatening new import tariffs, car prices in the US could rise by $1,000 to $3,000, not due to a supply shortage but as a direct result of these protectionist policies. While the intent behind these tariffs is to promote domestic manufacturing and reduce reliance on foreign goods, the reality is that the US auto industry depends heavily on international supply chains, particularly from Canada and Mexico. Essential components like engines, transmissions, and raw materials such as steel and aluminum come from these neighboring countries, while electronic parts and microchips often originate from Asia.